Surface preparation is critical for any concrete flatwork placement. This includes subbase material, proper subbase material compaction, metal reinforcement, and proper forming. All should be placed in conjunction with proper ACI specifications. When placing concrete, utilizing the right mix design and slump are critical. This should all be communicated prior to placement with the ready mix supplier. Depending on the type of exposed aggregate, a special aggregate mix might need to be incorporated in the mix design, or changes in the amount of sand and large and small aggregates required to achieve the certain look. Once the concrete is placed, it should be screeded into the forms. Screeding provides the initial level and flatness required for the finished result. Utilizing a proper rigid screed board in a sawing motion facilitates the proper flatness and levelness for the project. Once the concrete has achieved a certain set, utilizing a magnesium float brings up the paste and drives large aggregate down into the surface. This is very important for exposed aggregate to achieve the proper segregation and the proper surface when broadcasting aggregates. For detail work, hand floats are used around edges and in small, hard-to-reach places. Edging is also important, maintaining the proper form with the edge tool to produce a proper rounded curve. Once edging is complete, a float should be used to eliminate any edge lines in the body of the concrete. In this particular project, we begin by using a tape measure and string line to identify the center point of the concrete area. When doing this, it's best to use an unchalked or unpigmented string line, avoiding any color contamination to the concrete. Once the center point is identified, the rigid Bomanite medallion stencil is placed into that area. It is then troweled with a float, covering the entire stencil with concrete paste. It is important to make sure that the stencil is firmly embedded in the concrete and level with the concrete surface. There are multiple ways to achieve an exposed aggregate look. One is to incorporate aggregates in the concrete. The other is surface or hand broadcast. In this particular situation, we are going to be creating a custom blend for hand broadcast. We're going to be using black and white aggregate. It is important to make sure that the products are properly blended to the right consistency or ratio before application. Mixing in multiple buckets makes this process easy, and then utilizing the process known as boxing is important to get proper consistency. Boxing is moving the product back and forth between buckets to achieve the proper color consistency. Once the aggregates have been mixed, they are broadcast onto the concrete surface after it has achieved the proper level of set. Broadcasting in a sprinkle pattern is important to avoid driving the aggregate deep into the surface. The object here is to achieve a desired level of coverage with the aggregate consistently across the surface. Once the initial broadcast is complete, a second and sometimes third application is required, targeting areas that still show gray exposed concrete. Setting out a desired amount of aggregate to cover a certain square meter area is a good technique to use to assure proper coverage has been achieved. Once the aggregate has been applied to the desired consistency and coverage, bull float application is required to drive the aggregate into the surface and cover the entire surface with concrete paste. Once the concrete has set to where the surface can no longer be marred by foot traffic, the surface deactivator can be applied. Surface deactivator is a chemical that resists the setting of concrete. The color is a fugitive dye that allows the applicator to visually see an area that has been applied. The dye will have no impact on the final appearance of the concrete. Apply the Bomanite deactivator at the proper coverage rate to create a thin, uniform coverage across the entire concrete surface. Once the deactivator has been applied, cover the concrete with plastic to assure proper curing and that the concrete achieves the right hardness. After the concrete has set, typically overnight, remove the plastic and prepare to clean the surface. The concrete should be hard at this point and able to withstand the cleaning. Once the concrete has set, a low-pressure power washer can be used to remove the surface material. This will be a combination of the deactivator and concrete paste. The amount will vary by the depth of exposure. It is important to check with local regulations in how to properly dispose of the wastewater. In conjunction with power washing, a low RPM walk-behind scrubber can be used to remove any excess material and get the proper level of cleanliness. Within 24 hours of placement, construction joints should be cut into the concrete to eliminate random cracking. Standard practice requires the construction joint to go the depth 1/4 of the overall depth of the concrete. If the concrete is 10 centimeters thick, the construction joint should be 2.5 centimeters in depth. Follow Bomanite and ACI standards for proper placement and spacing of construction joints. As soon as the power washing and cleaning is complete, the stencil can be removed. This process should be slow and deliberate in order not to damage the concrete or the stencil. Start on one corner, lift and peel, and slowly remove the stencil across the area. Once again, being slow and deliberate in the removal process is important to achieve the proper consistency and cleanliness. The stencil pattern should be clean and crisp. You want to avoid any type of edging and raveling by removing the stencil too fast. Once the stencil has been removed, the area is cleaned with a combination of broom and power wash to remove all of the excess material. At this time, plastic can be placed on top of the concrete once again to allow for curing for the next 1 to 3 days. After the concrete has cured for the proper amount of time, a sealer can be applied. The sealer provides not only protection, but gives aesthetic value. In this case, a combination of ConShield and Bomaseal are going to be used. ConShield is a penetrating product that aids in waterproofing and protection from inside the concrete, while Bomaseal produces a thin film that protects the surface. Utilizing the right roller or application equipment is important. Applying the sealer in thin, multiple applications is best practice. Reference the Bomanite technical product specification guidelines for coverage rate and application technique. The project is now complete, and the aesthetic beauty can be realized for years to come.